regular team leaders are, as usual, Maggie Hamling, the distinguished painter, who is tonight sporting a moustache. And Frank Whitford, who is wearing a moustache because he always wears a moustache, is lecturer in the history of art at the Royal College of Art. On Frank's team, we have Hugh Cornwell, actor, songwriter and musician, member of the Stranglers pop group, and Peter Howson, painter, one of the explosive artists of the so-called New Glasgow School. On Maggie's team, we welcome Giles Orty, art critic for The Spectator. He started as a painter and taught painting at Epsom School of Art. He's particularly interested in what he calls the neglected corners of art. And Jock McFadgen, painter, lives in the East End of London and was the second artist in residence at the National Gallery, London. Well, now we've met the teams, we're going over to Frank, and we're going to show Frank's team the detail of a picture and see if he can guess A, the painter, and B, the title. So let's look at a detail.
Oh, yes. This is the Gauguin, Vision After the Sermon, Jacob Wrestling with the Angel as a subtitle in the Scottish National Gallery of Art in Edinburgh.
That's an awful lot of information.
1888.
You only get 20 points nevertheless. There it is. And we'll talk about Gauguin in his pre-South Sea days and see what everybody has to say about that particular school of painting. I think I'll start with you, Peter. It has certain affinities, I suppose, with Scottish painting.
Yeah, I used to hate Gauguin's work. I don't know why, but I used to find it. I mean, I used to only see the work that he did in Tahiti. I never used to see the earlier stuff. But I saw that painting in Edinburgh a few years ago, and I fell in love with it. I just love the composition, I love the colour, and the economy of it.
It may be important to know that he used this red, which after all is not exactly the colour of earth or grass as one would expect it, in order to signal that what these primitive peasant ladies are looking at is not actually happening. The subtitle is A Vision After the Sermon, and apparently what this is meant to represent is what is conjured up in these ladies' imaginations having heard a sermon in their local church.
I'm going to stay north of the border for the moment and ask Jock whether he likes this picture.
Yeah, I've always liked Gauguin. And the whole romantic thing, escaping from being an accountant.
Stockbroker, I think.
Yes.
Stockbroker.
Or banker, yeah.
It's nice to see a stockbroker painting a picture like this. Strange wrestling figures. I wouldn't have unravelled the narrative from looking at it, I don't think.
Giles?
Going to the Gauguin exhibition earlier this year in Paris, I was very struck by the Breton landscapes, some of which I'd never seen before in the flesh.
Oh, about this time?
Yes, about that period. And they were extraordinarily exuberant paintings. And the strange feeling I had when comparing them with some of the paintings from Tahiti and Marquesas was that a lot of the paintings from the South Seas were actually full of sort of melancholy and sadness. And I felt that he was tremendously homesick on the last trip.
Hugh?
Yeah, I love the composition of this. I'm very unfamiliar with Gauguin's work before. You always see so much is made of the Tahitian work that you very rarely see material from before, and it's good to see it. I hadn't seen this before.
And Maggie, I think you're the only one who said nothing yet.
The point is whether this if this is a vision, Gauguin has made it completely real. I mean, he has brought all these elements together of this so-called vision into a painting. I mean, he's brought together one moment of painting in which everything is as real as everything else. In other words, the vision on the red ground and the peasant women watching, everything you accept as real.
Yes.
And I think that's very important.
Yes. Well, let's look at the score there. We've got 20 for Frank's team. Nothing for Maggie's yet, but Maggie hasn't had a detail or indeed a picture which she's going to get now.
An idea from my right.
I think it might be Tissot.
Well, it's interesting you should say so, because when I first saw this picture, I thought it looked like a Tissot, but in fact it isn't a Tissot.
Thank you very much.
We're inclined to go towards Whistler.
No, you're also going in the wrong direction. It's
it's
nearer to Tissot. We're going to open it out for Maggie's team.
It's a Victorian painter.
That is perfectly true. Quite a well-known Victorian painter. But going over to Frank's team, will look equally puzzled.
I'm going to say it for the sake of having to say something. Walter Greaves.
No. Do you know what the title is, by the way?
For the bridge at the...
Bridge, I'm going to give you 5 for.
Is it London?
No. No, 5 points scored there. Neither of you get it. It's by a very well-known painter called John Atkinson Grimshaw.
Oh, good Lord.
But Grimshaw usually painted night scenes, and we can look at one of those. I think if you've got that, you've got it. Don't you think? That is Hull, by the way. Now, this is a very original painter, in my view, in that he dealt with a subject nobody else much dealt with. In fact, Whistler, I think, was very impressed by it and thought, Whistler said he thought he'd painted the first Nocturne, and then he saw a Grimshaw, as Grimmy, as he called him, and realised that he hadn't. Giles, now this is rather one of your corners, isn't it?
Well, not specifically. I'm ashamed to say that I did suspect, and then I didn't quite have the courage to go through.
Well, you've got to have a lot of chutzpah on this programme, yes. John, what do you think of Grimshaw? Or if you've never seen Grimshaw, what do you think of this picture?
Well, it's a new one on me, I have to confess. Great colour. I don't have much of a hook on it, really, apart from the colour and the description of the townscape and the atmosphere, I guess, is the main subject of the picture.
The original, I think they are quite magical, or they can be. A sense of atmosphere. I mean, almost the smell of damp comes off these canvases.
Right.
Hugh.
Yeah, this is new to me as well. I think it's quite interesting. I've heard Whistler twice now in relation to this painter, and yet he predated Whistler, is that correct?
Well, he was painting Nocturnes before Whistler, and Whistler suddenly realised this when he saw one of them later. We're looking, of course, at the more typical one. The other is In the Light of Day. What do you think about it, Peter?
I don't like the first one at all, and I don't much like the Nocturne scene either. I think it's not a patch on Whistler anyway. I think Whistler took his art to the limit, whereas Grimshaw didn't quite make it.
Maggie?
I find no extra vision in this painting that I actually require from great artists. I find it very literal, very craftsmanlike. I mean, very worthy, very well painted, and I ask something more. I mean, life is short.
Yes.
And I think that one should look at great paintings, and I don't consider this one of them.
All right. Well, the score hasn't shifted. It's still 20, Frank's team, 5 for Maggie's. Now, let's look at another detail, and this one goes to Frank.
Oh, yeah, this is in the Ashmolean, Oxford, and it's Uccello, isn't it? And it's called The Hunt in the Forest.
That's again 20 points, you see. You can't go wrong with Frank sitting there.
Well, I must say we've had easier ones than the other side have had, so in that sense I think we're doing very well.
Back. Jock has fairly iconoclastic ideas. What do you think of Uccello?
I think he's terrific, actually. I really like everything about him, and I think they're very sculptural, aren't they, because of the, I suppose, it could be called primitive, but the lack of knowledge about movement at that time, before film and television. Everything's very static and staged.
Long time before film and television.
A little before, yes.
So a little before.
But they're very ambitious paintings for all that, to make, I mean, it must have been incredible to try and make pictures of huge, complex battle scenes. It's a mega picture, isn't it? It's Busby Berkeley
What's very confusing about it is that it has, one uses the word primitive meaning early, really. It has certain early qualities, the way the flowers are
has
displayed.
primitive style, doesn't it?
Yeah. The way the flowers are painted looks very much like flowers in tapestry and so on.
Yeah.
At the same time, he was obsessed with perspective.
Looking at, as the camera came back and I saw the whole picture, there was a certain, the dead of night at the top of the picture, and at the bottom all the figures had so much light and life about them. It reminded me of that quite surrealist element. It reminds me of that painted by the Belgian with the dark day and night, and the Magritte in the same painting.
Yeah.
Don't say that to George, you'll set him off.
No, you won't. But it is perfectly true that Uccello was one of the earlier artists that the Surrealists very much admired.
I mean, one of the aspects of looking at art from all different centuries is that I think a lot of people distinguish very strongly between art of different centuries. But I think this is the kind of painting that people can enjoy very much today. I don't feel that one feels that this is something just utterly irrelevant and has no bearing on our time and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly the costume rather puts it in its period.
One wonders, though one cannot answer the question, of his intentions, what he thought he was doing, whether he thought he was being realistic. I mean, those figures there, all raising their hands in excitement at the Hun, remain curiously unreal, curiously dreamlike. But did he think, because he was using perspective?
Well, yeah, I think he did, and they only look curiously unreal to us because our eyes have been educated in a different way.
Certainly. I mean, he is trying to paint movement. And if we could go into a detail of this, what looks like a greyhound or a lurcher, in the bottom left of the painting, I would have said that was an extremely true moment in the movement of a dog. I mean,
Yes,
you can't get much truer
well,
than that.
except I mean, photography has since demonstrated that dogs, animals, don't actually move quite like that.
Well, it's extremely convincing to me. I mean, every implicit movement is in that dog. And it seems to me that's what he's painting about. And in his time, he did it.
Good, well, let's have a look there. We've got, due to Frank being able to rat it all off much more than wasn't needed, we've got 40 points for Frank. And we've got 5 for Maggie. But the next picture, or object, or whatever you like to call it, there's a good clue,
Animal
goes to
mineral.
Maggie's team, and here is the detail.
Oh, dear. I think it's a three-dimensional contemporary painter.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, he ain't.
I know this, George. It's a Schwitters, and it's a
Yes.
detail from the barn in Ambleside, which is kept in the University Collection in Newcastle. It's the Merz barn, M-E-R-Z.
Yes, it's actually called Elterwater Metz, because the barn is in Elterwater, but I mean, you've obviously got it, and again, more than necessary.
The word Merz comes from an early
20
collage
points.
where he used the word Commerzbank,
Yes.
commercial bank in German, and snipped it up so that just M-E-R-Z remained. And he called his whole art Merz, didn't
Yes, he did.
he? Rather than
Now,
Dada.
what happened here was, what I'd always understood was a farmer, but turns out to be an architect as well, took Schwitters under his wing. I'd always imagined this horny-handed son of toil, not at all, a very sophisticated architect who owned a farm, took Schwitters, who was living in comparative poverty in Ambleside, under his wing, and offered him a barn in which to construct a Merz construction such as he'd made in Hanover, which was bombed, and such as he'd begun to make in Norway. And he didn't complete it because he was a very, very sick man. But eventually, when he died, the Newcastle Gallery attached to the university transported it all in an enormous lorry. And there, if you're particularly lucky, because it usually seems to be shut, you can actually see it. Now, Giles, I've read you often, and I imagine you'd have very little sympathy with this activity, but I might be totally wrong.
You are totally wrong. I think the great difference between Schwitters and some artists nearer our own time, who also work with rejected materials, is that Schwitters transformed waste materials into a marvelous aesthetic experience, whereas a lot of people sort of turn rubbish into more rubbish.
Can I say I agree with Giles and what he was saying about the modern people, and that they've kind of missed the point a wee bit. I think Schwitters and Duchamp, you know, they had the right idea and they used objects in a very beautiful way, and I think it's been totally perverted by some of the modern people.
Frank, I know you studied this subject quite a lot. What was Schwitter's intention in making Merzbaus, houses which were transformed by adding to them
Well, he was trying to transform his environment, and he was trying, as it were, to establish a quite intimate relationship with the space that he was living in. And the point about them was that they were constantly changing. He was constantly adding to them and taking bits away.
So it was really an attempt to make his surroundings totally at one with his imaginings.
I believe so, yeah. I
good.
can't explain it any other way.
Oh, thank you. I think that's a pretty good explanation. Let's look at the score. Oh, Frank's team has 60, and Maggie's team has 5. So the moustache doesn't seem to work much magic there, Maggie. But the thing is that the next question goes to Frank. There we are.
Oh, heavens, now I ought to know this.
Painter? No.
Dear, no, I don't. You can say what you like. I mean, go.
I'd go for Delacroix, but...
You thought of Delacroix. Interesting, as you'll see, that you thought of Delacroix. Let's go over to Maggie's team.
We have to say that we haven't a clue.
Right, let's go back again.
My friend knows it
Open
now,
out.
without even
Is
opening
it
it out.
Angre?
Yeah, how right
yes,
you were.
it is.
Now, I must say, he said Angre before it even came out. It's the Turkish bath, so it's
Yeah.
Angre and the Turkish bath.
5 each.
And how extraordinary, you know, I've never really looked at that little detail.
Well,
That's not surprising.
we chose it for that reason,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
But what is so fascinating is that you should have first thought of Delacroix,
Yes.
who was Angre's great
Arch enemy.
rival.
It conjures up all sorts of... For one thing, what French gentlemen thought went on in harems, because there was a whole genre of paintings, odalisques, I think that was the French word for harem lady,
Yes.
and they must have thought that the Turks got up to
They drank tea.
wild times, and that sort of everything was available, not only in Turkey, of course, but also in North Africa.
Drop me off in harem.
Yes, indeed.
Now, moving over here, I'm going to ask Jock.
I like Ang anyway, with the very contemplative description of flesh anyway, because he was so slow, and everything's lovingly agonized over, and every trace of, I guess, expressive brush mark is erased.
I think this is one of those paintings where your eye can go around discovering more and more marvelous things. If you actually, flew into the far background, you can find a lot of other marvelous little paintings, apart from the obvious foreground composition.
This lady has Madame Matissier's hand, actually, going like this.
Well,
That figure that we're looking at now, of course, he liked
this
so
is-
much that he painted again, didn't he?
Yes, that one.
That's the so-called Valpinçon bather.
Yes.
That just appears on her own, but that same pose, that same woman, the same turban on her head. I don't think we should lightly overlook...
This is a job lot.
Well, I don't think we should lightly overlook the intentionally pornographic aspects of this picture.
Now, I
Why
was just
use the
about to
word
say that.
pornographic, Frank? I
Well,
mean, it is
or erotic anyway.
celebratedly sensual.
Yeah, but...
Wonderfully sensual.
it
What's
was-
pornographic about it? It is about pleasure, it's about flesh.
There was
Why
quite a-
use the word pornographic?
Quite a lively market for paintings of this kind, also by
I
great
believe there
painters.
still is. But here we have a masterpiece of sensual painting. What's pornographic about it? It's about pleasure. Why not?
I daren't contradict her. She's looking so grim.
She's looking grim about pleasure. Well, people often do, I'm afraid. However, there's undoubtedly a lot of activity that would make it appeal to Victorian gentlemen who like that sort of thing. The fact is also it's a work of genius. Well, let's look at the score there. We've got 70, Frank. Maggie, we've got 5. We're going to leave the studio now for a moment so that the viewers can take a little televisual trip round a museum or gallery. This week's gallery is the Burrell Collection outside Glasgow. The new gallery opened by the Queen in 1983, where the architectural blend of old and new has proved so successful that the Burrell is now the leading tourist attraction in Scotland. William Burrell, who was born in Glasgow in 1861, made his fortune as a shipping magnate and donated his art collection to the city in 1944 with a gift of £45,000 to house it. Using stonework such as this English gateway, the Hornby Gateway, originally bought for the American tycoon William Randolph Hearst, and a skillful contrast of glass, wood and metal, the Burrell is a proof that a modern gallery can be a pleasure to walk through. The collection is of interest for the individual paintings rather than a particular school, though there are 3 works by Degas and Chaux, including the ever-popular ballet scene called The Rehearsal, and the famous Jockeys in the Rain, which we featured on gallery before, and which is strongly influenced by Japanese prints. The Burrell collection also contains The Trumpeter of the Lancers of the Guard by Théodore Géricault, 1812, and Boudin's superb Jetty at Trouville, 1869. Scottish art is represented by Joseph Crawhall, one of the Glasgow boys and a personal friend of Sir William Burrell, whom he never tired of collecting. And the Flower Shop by Crawhill in watercolour on linen is not to be missed. Our picture of the week, however, which was once part of the French Royal Collection, is this early self-portrait by Rembrandt, painted in 1632. Right, now what we have here is a painting for Maggie's team. If you can also recognize or know the museum from which this picture comes, you would score a further 10 points. So let's have the detail.
We're going for Rembrandt.
You're quite right. You get 10 points for that. Have you any idea of which Rembrandt?
Is it in the National Gallery?
It's not in the National Gallery, I'm afraid. So you don't get 10 for the...
Margrethe de Geer.
What?
Another one of Margrethe de Geer.
No. It's not. So I'm going to pass it over as a detail to Frank's team.
Well, it's a bit obvious to say. I mean, I don't think any of us is particularly confident. I mean, it's a bit obvious to say self-portrait. I'm not even convinced that it is a self-portrait, but we'll say that for the sake of saying something.
Yes, well, you get 10 for that.
Do we?
Yes.
That was lucky. That was another fluke.
It was lucky. Now, you've no idea where it is.
Now, where are the great Rembrandts in this country? I think my friend might have.
Yes, well, you
Kelvin Grove.
No, you're wrong. You've got the right city, but you're bang in the middle of it, in that enormous building, and in fact, it's some distance on the outskirts of the suburbs. It's the Burrell collection, Glasgow. You?
Well, I don't know how many he'd done before he did this one, but it's certainly got a certain freshness to me about it. He's obviously very confident, and I like confidence and strength in painting.
Peter?
It's hard-edged, well, more hard-edged than the later work, which was almost pure paint in some ways. This has got definite lines, and it's not so mysterious, and I still love it, though. I love the way he gets that kind of half shadow in, and then reflected light on the other side of the face as well, and it's just a beautiful technique that he's got.
I think that already in this self-portrait is that challenge of the world and that questioning of the world in the whole expression. And there's something of take me or leave me. I mean, you know, straight away, it's completely honest. There's no kind of glamorizing, as perhaps Courbet glamorized himself in the early self-portraits, with swords and buckles and all that kind of thing. There is that challenge to the world in this early portrait that is just the same challenge to the world as in the portraits in old age. I mean, we just have a master.
It's difficult for us to extract any Rembrandt self-portrait, I think, because collectively they are one of the sort of 8 wonders of the world, I think. And I think there's more self-observation and self-contemplation and kind of confession in a Rembrandt self-portrait than any other painter I can think of, which almost, I suppose, means that he was such a consummate painter. He transcended conceit in painting, in a way.
Yes. Now we're going to look at the score, finally. Not a moment I'm going to enjoy, because I'm very fond of Maggie. We've got 80 points here from Frank, and 15 points from Maggie's team. And now from Hugh, Frank, Peter, Giles, Maggie and Jock, and from me, George Melly, and from Gallery itself, bye.